and welcome or welcome back to another episode of The Pilot Principle. This is the podcast where we take a look at just the first episode of a series, the pilot, and then use it to decide if we should watch the entire series, because there's just so much out there, bro, and I actually just can't keep up. So if we can just watch the first episode and let it tell us whether the series is going to bang, then that's what we're going to do. So if this sounds like something that you're into, because it's definitely something I'm into, then make sure to follow wherever you are currently listening to this podcast, because I review a new show every single week-ish. Now, on this episode of The Pilot Principle, we are going to be chatting episode 1 of Netflix's new limited historical drama series, American Primeval. A mother hires a reluctant guide to lead her and her son to safety in this gritty Western epic. Do you know what's funny? American Primeval looks like the exact opposite of what I think I'd like. Firstly, it's a Western. Don't quite care for Westerns. Secondly, there's dirt everywhere. I mean, I don't know about you, but the whole no running water, constantly being cold, all situations I would never personally ever physically put myself into a position of being in, makes me physically uncomfortable to watch. So that's actually the main reason why a show like American Primeval doesn't look like it's for me. I just don't want to be cold or dirty, even though I'm not the one cold or dirty. But you know what? If I can do it for Vikings, I love a good Norse show me, then I figured I'd give it a go for a bit of American history. Before we get into how gritty this Western gets, let's roll right on ahead into the credits. We have no pilot title, but the pilot synopsis tells us that at a desolate outpost, Sarah and her son Devin forge new connections while searching for a guide to help them navigate the trails further west. We have an average episode length of 50 minutes across this 6-episode series. Mike L. Smith is the writer and the creator, and Mike L. Smith wrote the 2024 Twisters movie. What's that phrase that everybody kept saying? Giddy up cowboy, cyclone rider, anyway, whatever. And he also wrote The Revenant, the movie that finally won Leonardo DiCaprio an Oscar. And the whole Revenant thing definitely feels on par to American Primeval. That was another dirty show. Just unwashed people everywhere. The pilot episode was directed by Peter Berg, and Peter Berg directed the movie Friday Night Lights, as well as a few episodes of the series. More recently, he directed the series Painkiller, which I've heard really good things for, and I should probably try to watch. The pilot stars Taylor Kitsch, who plays Isaac Reed. And to be perfectly honest with you, this was the main reason that I decided to press play on the pilot episode. I know, I'm so cliche. Now, Taylor Kitsch starred in Friday Night Lights, the series, where he played Timmy Riggins. That was supposed to be a southern drawl. Let me try that again. Timmy Riggins. No, terrible. He also starred in True Detective and Painkiller. Sensing a bit of a theme going on here. Betty Gilpin plays Sarah Rowell, and I'm actually not familiar with her work, but she has starred in Glow and The Tomorrow War. The pilot also stars Dane DeHaan, Sarah Lightfoot Leon, Preston Motor, Shawnee Poirier, and Shay Wiggum. One thing I think you should know up front before we get into talking about the pilot episode too deeply is that American Primeval is set in 1857 during the Utah War, which is also referred to by some as the Mormon War. So this was a confrontation between Mormon settlers and the US government and armed forces, and this lasted for just over a year. So in 1857 to 1858, according to Wikipedia. I'm not a historian. Historians, please feel free to correct me. Right, okay, now that that's been said, let's start talking about the first 10 minutes of the pilot episode. And if you don't know, we talk about the first 10 minutes of a pilot episode because this is what should entice us to keep watching. So I just give you a little rundown and I tell you whether I think it was good. Ideally, the first 10 minutes should convince us to watch the entire 60 minutes, and then the entire 60 minutes should convince us to watch the entire, 6 episodes. So the first 10 minutes of the pilot episode of American Primeval goes like this. We get some on-screen text for a bit of scene setting. Utah Territory, 1857, wild and untamed. So the United States Army, Mormon militia, Native Americans and pioneers are all locked in a brutal war for survival. Everyone else is caught in the crossfire. That's actually a very good setup. Anyway, then we are at what counts as the end of the line. So the last stop on the train in Missouri, where mother and son, Sarah, I'm just going to call her Sarah, where mother and son, Sarah and Devin, wait for their guide, who is very late, to take them to Utah. I think they're going to Utah, or they're going to somewhere just before Utah. Eventually, the guide arrives and they set off, but unfortunately, they arrive in possibly Utah too late. And the traveling party that Sarah had planned to join to take her to her final destination, Crook Spring, left weeks ago. So now she is stuck in Fort Bridger, which is this desolate outpost the synopsis mentioned. Now, despite everybody telling Sarah to wait for a better season to travel on account of the wolves, the mountains, the Mormons, and the war, Sarah is a persistent woman. And so the fort's owner introduces Sarah and Devin to a lone wolf man named Isaac Reed. And that is about the 11-minute mark. And as an intro, you know what, I think it didn't sound good as I was just describing it to you, but I think it was pretty decent. I think it gives us a good historical context up front. Also, I can really feel Sarah's desperation to get the hell out of Dodge, aka the desolate outpost town, Fort Bridger. I'm already thinking, what's the hurry, Sarah? Like, why have you got to go so quickly? Why are you hounding everybody's coattails to get the hell out of here? What's chasing you, hun? So that's well done. And also we get a little teaser intro to Isaac. So yeah, I think as an intro, I'm intrigued. And that's all you need, to be intrigued, to go a little bit further after the 10-minute mark. Now, moving on to talking about character, there pretty much is one, the main character to talk about, and that is Sarah Rowell. It could very well be Sarah Rowell, but I'm just going to have to pick an intonation, and I'm picking Sarah Rowell. Yeah. So Sarah is a single, determined mama bear. She wants to get to Crook Springs, where she tells everybody that her husband is waiting for her and her son. However, despite her fierce determination, which we love, I feel like Sarah just needs to take things a little seriously, specifically the journey. Everybody's constantly telling her that it's a perilous, difficult journey to wait because there's all kinds of manner of terrible things along the way. And she is very clear when she tells everybody that she can handle herself. And I don't doubt that, you know, but also maybe heed the advice of these dirty men who live out here in this mud-ridden outpost, you know. But she doesn't heed their advice. She ignores all of them. And to be honest, the fort owner does introduce her to Isaac Reed to help get her to Crook Spring, but Isaac said no. So Sarah had to figure out another means of travel and has decided to travel with the Mormons, despite everybody telling her not to do that. Both a lot and a little happens over the pilot episode, but Sarah's characteristic doesn't necessarily change or develop, which isn't a bad thing. I'm just stating facts here. In terms of Sarah's dynamics with others, firstly, we have to mention her son, Devin. So Devin wears a brace and he actually does not want to go to Crook Spring. He says that his dad doesn't want them. He would rather go further on to California or stay at the dirty fort, which obviously is not going to happen at all. And Sarah is very protective over her son. She's constantly making sure she knows where he is and that he's not talking to any weird strangers or looking at any violence. She's very protective of him, which makes sense. But she doesn't coddle him. She is quite stern with him, but in a loving way. She's just got shit to do, innit? And like, we don't have time for you to be wandering off, son. Stay by my side. You know, it's dangerous in these streets. So, you know, I respect that. And the next person that we kind of see her interact with a little bit, but we know it's going to, you know, feature on throughout the entirety of the series, is Isaac. And Sarah's repulsed by him for some reason. I don't quite understand why she doesn't like him, except for the fact that he says no. Like, that's all he says. He's like, nah, man, I'm not going to take you to Crook Springs. I don't have business there. I don't want to do that for no reason, despite the fact you'll give me money. I just don't want to do that. And that seems to make her really irritated. And yeah, it's giving. I was going to say it's giving enemies to lovers. That's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? But, you know, they clearly don't like each other, or she doesn't like him for whatever reason. But we don't really see how that manifests in the pilot episode. Okay, there are a few more characters to talk very briefly about. The first is, of course, Isaac Reed, who is naked and unconcerned. So, because that's how we meet him, naked and unconcerned. So we don't see too much of him in the pilot episode, but he is definitely drawn to Sarah and Devon, because even though he says, nah, mate, I have no business in Crook Springs, when Sarah storms off and decides to join the Mormons across the plains, he kind of follows, like at a distance, like a frontier Batman, you know? And maybe perhaps he too had a wife and son he couldn't protect, that he's now like, I'm going to protect Sarah and Devon. It's hard to say, but he barely speaks in the pilot episode. The only other characters to mention are the newlyweds, the Pratts, and that is Jacob and Abish. And we meet Jacob and Abish Pratt because they are the Mormons, or part of the Mormon party that Sarah and Devon joined to get across the plains. All we really know about Jacob and Abish is that Jacob loves Abish, and Abish is unsure of her place in the world / Mormonism, because I believe her sister was supposed to marry Jacob, but then I think her sister died, so she's marrying him instead, because that's how they rolled in 1857. So yeah, that's really it. Now, in terms of antagonists, I mean, I suppose the Mormons, if you want to, you know, be black and white about it, are the antagonists, or specifically Brigham Young, who we don't meet in the pilot episode, but we do hear about from others, and we feel like he's the great puppeteer pulling all the strings for the Mormons. And he has basically got these ideals about making Utah an independent country from the US. And so, you know, we sort of start to learn the lengths he'll go to make that happen, which basically makes everyone else in the state tense, which is basically antagonist behavior. And now it is time for a very quick interlude to see what my TV and film life is looking like beyond the pilot principle. Starting, of course, with books. Now, if you've listened to the last episode, I'm basically going to repeat myself for this entire section. Okay, so just bear with, caller. So in regards to books, I have recently finished reading The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman, and that is the third book in the Thursday Murder Club series. It's the green one, because they're all color-coded, which I think is quite nice. I wonder what the next color is going to be. Well, actually, after green, there's purple, but I don't know what's happening after purple. Yellow? I'm going to say it now. I think it's going to be yellow. Yeah. Anyway, back on track. Really enjoyable. If you like a cozy mystery vibe, if you've been thinking about reading the Thursday Murder Club, but you're like, oh no, it's too mainstream, it's actually pretty good. Don't cut off your literary nose to spite your literary face. Yeah. And so having finished that, I started reading Five Survive by Holly Jackson, and Holly Jackson wrote A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, the series, which is actually also been turned into a television series on BBC Three. I actually did an episode about that last year, so feel free to listen to that. The book is better, though. I'll just tell you that now for free. So I'm reading Five Survive, which I'm only 50 pages in, so I can't say much more about it than that. Moving over to film, and I have only watched 2 films this year. The first being Memoir of a Snail, which I think is a solid start. This one, did it win the Golden Globe for Best Animation? No, Flow won, didn't it? I don't know where the hell I can get access to Flow, but that's definitely on my list. Anyway, Memoir of a Snail was nominated for a bunch of animation awards this year, so I watched that. It's Australian, it's weird, but also kind of cute and sad. And then I watched Longlegs, which is this Nicolas Cage horror film that everybody was like ranting and raving and frothing at the mouth over in 2024, and it was all right. I was quite disappointed, in fact, because I'm really trying hard to watch good shit this year. I want my average Letterboxd rating to be a 3.5 this year. It's really towering in that 2 section, and it's just really upsetting me. So very disappointed with Longlegs. Moving over to TV land, and I finally watched Baby Reindeer. I can understand the hype. I see why it won a bunch of awards. I also kind of liked that it was quite short. Like, it's 7 episodes. They're about half an hour. 1 or 2 of them might be 40 minutes. But the pacing is quite good. Although, annoyingly, I didn't actually like the main character. For various reasons I'm not going to get into. But let's use the word self-indulgent. So it could be the writing that I didn't like. It's just his voice was everywhere. And like, he was just in it all the time. Like, what's the B plot? You know, what's the C plot, hun? Yeah, it was good. I can see why people really liked it. I did really like it too. I did. You know me, I'm a hater, so I'll just like slay everything. But no, Baby Reindeer, I get the hype. I'm not sure that I would recommend it though. There are a whole bunch of trigger warnings everywhere, so user discretion is advised. I also started watching Parenthood as my little lunchtime easy watch. So this is an old series. I mean, old is relative, isn't it? But it stars Lauren Graham and, oh God, Peter Krause and a whole bunch of other people. But they are siblings, and this came out just after Gilmore Girls finished. So this is what Lauren Graham did next. And also Lauren Graham did in fact date Peter Krause for a very long time. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because they play siblings in the show. So that's kind of funny to me. So sometimes I see them giving each other a look and I'm like, whoa, keep it in your pants, people. You're playing siblings. It's not that kind of show. Very much enjoying it thus far though. It's nice, easy, comforting, chill out watch. And the last thing to note, which I'm going to whisper, is that I still have not finished watching The Day of the Jackal, but I intend to, and I will be finished it before the end of the month. Okay, so let's not talk about it any further. And that's all there is to discuss. So yeah, make sure you let me know what you're watching or reading over on Instagram and Twitter at Pilot Principal. And yeah, let's get back into talking about the gritty Western, the dirty West, the dirty Western known as American Primeval. Over the course of the pilot episode, there are 3 main plot points that have been set up. So the first one, which is the main one, the A plot, the number 1 spot, whoop whoop, is about Sarah's travels to Crooks Spring with her shadow, frontier Batman, Isaac Reed. I mean, Sarah is the main character. She's made it very clear as soon as we meet her that she is traveling to Crooks Spring, come hell or high water or wolves or mountains or Mormons. So yeah, that's why that is the main plot point for the pilot and I suppose the series. The B plot is the ownership of Utah territory. It does feature a little bit in the pilot episode in terms of it's teed up. So when Sarah leaves the desolate outpost with the Mormons, they stop for a break, just, you know, out on the plains or whatever. And then this group of men who are Mormons and part of the Mormon army come and tell this party who are traveling, because it's not just like Sarah and the Mormons, there are a bunch of other people as well, but they're traveling west. And these Mormon militia men come and they're like, no, you don't have a permit to be here. You have to go back east. Like, we hate you. And then like the Americans who are like guiding all of these people, the pioneers out west, they're like, well, Brigham Young doesn't own this territory. This is still the US of A, punk. And then like everyone starts looking at their guns and things. So it's definitely a massive point of contention in the background to Sarah trying to journey to Crooks Spring, which is why it's the B plot. And in terms of the C plot, the teeny tiny plot, we meet this mute girl in the pilot episode who will later be known as Two Moons. So she has run away from home, and I think she lives around the fort, the desolate outpost fort, and she basically hides away in Sarah's wagon and ends up, you know, traveling with her en route to Crooks Springs, as in she's there when everybody stops and the Mormon militia are like, get off our land type situation. But also the C plot could be about Jacob and Abish's marriage. That's also teed up in the pilot episode. So yeah, that C plot could go one of 2 ways. I mean, hey, one of them could be a D plot, technically. Now that we know where we stand, let's fast forward to the end of episode Hook, where everything goes batshit cray. So essentially there is a massive massacre scene that takes place in the later half of the pilot episode. And the end of episode Hook riffs off of this. So firstly, we learned that the raid was organized by the Mormon militia who were like, get off our land. And there are a bunch of witnesses to the fact that they did it, because they did it wearing hoods and stuff, but they obviously should not have committed mass murder for any reason. So now it's like, oh shit, who saw us, do that? That's awkward. And Sarah and Devon were there during the massacre, but managed to escape. And so they are on the run from the Mormon militia who want to any witnesses. And they thankfully run into their frontier Batman, Isaac Reed. And Sarah and Devon are now at his mercy, which sounds really sinister. It's not. It's not sinister. He saves them, but they still need a guide to take them to Crook Spring, and their old guide is basically dead. Also, because Sarah's day could not be getting any better, it turns out that Sarah has a bounty on her head for murder up in Philadelphia, and bounty hunters are now on her trail, having showed up at the desolate fort place. Actually, that fort really wasn't desolate. There were bare people around. I wonder why I call it a desolate outpost. It's not desolate. Loads of people there. I mean, I wouldn't want to live there, but I'm just saying, like, there's like a good community of people living in this outpost or around the outpost. But anyway, yes, a bountyman comes by the outpost looking for Sarah, and it's got a big bounty on her head. It's like a whole $1,500 worth of bounty. That would pay my rent for a month. So, big money. In terms of looking at where we began with where we ended, it feels like it's a bit 2 steps forward, 1 step back for poor Sarah. But we understand her desperation from the start now, and we are rooting for her. I mean, she survived a massacre. Poor woman. And her son survived too. Don't you even worry about it. So yeah, go Sarah, run. I don't know what happened to you up in Philadelphia, boy, but I'm on your side. You have shown yourself to be a strong, determined, individualistic woman. And so I'm already thinking that whoever you murdered in Philadelphia deserved it. And so from everything we learn from the main plot points in the pilot episode that will bleed out towards the series and the end of episode Hook, I'm just sort of thinking that the series could end up being a continued perilous journey to Crook's Spring for Sarah and Devon. And hopefully there'll be some justice for the violent massacre that took place. I mean, the Mormon militia should definitely be found out, I think. That's my prediction anyway for the series. If we're talking about what the pilot did really well, I don't mean to keep harping on about it, but that massacre scene, that massacre scene was incredibly well shot. I mean, they did that in a cheeky single take. And we're talking horses, men on horses, rogue horses, axes, guns, oxen running wild, shit on fire. It was beautiful for such, sad brutality, etc. It was really well covered, really well shot, really well choreographed. Just a beautiful piece of cinema, if you ask me. And on that note, I would say that if you like, or at least don't mind, some pretty violent action scenes, then possibly you should look into watching American Primeval. If you like when TV takes a leaf out of the untold history books, or I should say the lesser told history books, because personally I had no idea about this whole Utah War Mormon malarkey before I started watching American Primeval. So if you like discovering new histories, then yeah, possibly give this one a watch. And also, if you just don't mind that whole like unwashed era of history, which I know is like quite a lot of history, then that's another reason for you to press play and see how you feel. There's a lot of mud though. Everyone is filthy. Everyone's just got dirt marks on their face, and everyone's like fingernails are just so grim. I just can't. But if you can look past all of that, which most people probably will, then yeah, check out American Primeval. On the flippity flip side, if you prefer a straight cut narrative, person going from A to B, person trying and failing to do X and Y, but learning 1, 2, and 3, then I feel like you probably won't connect with this series. Also, of course, if you don't like gore/violence, then, you might be okay for most of it, but, be ready to look away. And personally for me, in terms of what maybe let the pilot episode down just a little bit, is that considering we get all this historical context, I feel like a little map would have been nice. Okay, like just a little map. Let us know where Utah is. When we meet Sarah, she's off the last train in Wyoming. How long did it take her to get from Wyoming to Utah? How long will it take to get from Utah to Crook Springs? Her son Devin mentions California. I feel like getting a sense geographically of the distance that they need to travel would have been nice. I suppose all that is left for me to do is to give American Primeval a pilot score, and I will be giving it a 4 out of 5. Personally, for me, I think the writing, the cinematography, the historical world building, and then the little twist ending of Sarah being a wanted woman is a lot of stuff that was packed into the pilot episode, and it all worked. I was a bit like, oh, where's this going? Then I was like, bam, I see you. It was a good snowball effect of a pilot episode, I'd say. I would also say that it falls ever so slightly short because I wanted more Taylor Kitsch. And you are sort of wondering for a while what the pilot is gearing up towards. And we're like, oh, okay, she's just going on a journey. Okay, cool. Giddy up, yeehaw, pioneers, Utah, Mormonism. But I suppose if you know about the Utah massacre, then the massacre would not have taken you by surprise the way it took me by surprise. But overall, yeah, even though I'll need a hot shower after each episode, I think I'm going to keep going, Interesting piece of history. Taylor Kitsch. Literally the hero's journey played out on screen. Yeah. Yeah? Shall we? Shall we do it? Collectively? I'll do it if you do it. No. Let me know if you are deciding to give this one a go or if you're going to give it a miss. Thanks for joining me this week. Don't forget you can chat to me over on Instagram and Twitter at Pilot Principle, and I will catch you on the next episode. Aww.